Good morning, Buenos and Hafa Day. Welcome to the Guam Caucus Building. Today is January 3rd. It's 9 a.m. The Committee on Environment, Revenue and Taxation and Procurement is calling this public hearing to order. Notice of today's public hearing was provided to senators, stakeholders, and the local media on December 26, 2019, meeting the 5-day notice, and December 31st, 2019, meeting the 48-hour notice, thus meeting the requirements of open government law. I would like to acknowledge my colleague who has joined me here today, Senator Clint Rigel, and Senator Will Castro. So the purpose of today's public hearing is to receive testimony on 4 executive appointments. The first one will be Mr. Nonito V. Blas to serve as a member of the Guam Environmental Protection Agency Board of Directors. The second one would be the executive appointment of Ms. Cynthia V. Akube to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization. The third executive appointment is Mr. Pelagio S. Sardoma to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization. And the fourth one is the executive appointment for Mr. Pedro S. N. Guerrero to serve as a member, the utilities representative of the Public Utilities Commission. So to begin our agenda, we would like to call the nominee, Nonito Blas, and any members who have come here today to provide testimony. So if you can please come forward to the table. You can press the button when you're ready to speak, and please state your name for the record.
Nonito Vincent Blas, Jr.
Thank you. So if I can just interject, just to remind the public about the importance of this board. So the board is important because it appoints the administrator of the Guam EPA who oversees regulations of our environmental laws here on Guam. And the board also appoints the deputy administrator who is the underling for the administrator. So some of the powers and duties of the board, they're responsible for implementing a series of Guam's laws. So they include the Guam Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act, the Toxic Substances Exposure Compensation Act, the Guam Beverage Container Recycling Act, the Water Resources Conservation Act, the Water Pollution Control Act, Toilet Facilities and Sewage Disposal Act, the Air Pollution Control Act, the Guam Pesticides Act, Solid Waste Management and Litter Control Act, Waste, Water and Water Operators Mandatory Certification Act, the Safe Drinking Water Act, the Guam Lead Ban Act, the Environmental Pollution Control Act, the Guam Oil Spill Responder Act, Choose to Reuse, Munga Ma Adzik E Plastic Act, the Underground Storage of Regulated Substances Act, and the Above Ground Storage of Regulated Substances Act. The board is also very vital in publishing notices of violations. So for citizens that have violated these laws, the agency has the capability to give them notices of violations, orders of compliance, notices of defense, voluntary compliance agreements of Guam Pesticides Act, the Guam Beverage Container Recycling Act, settlement agreements, referrals to the Office of the Attorney General for prosecution. And so the members of these boards are critical to the enforcement of these laws that protect public health and the environment. So having said that, I would like to welcome the nominee to provide his testimony.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Nonito V. Blas. I am from the beautiful village of Mingilao. Upon graduation from Father Duenas in 1981, I enlisted in the Navy. I served 38 years, and then I recently retired back in September. In my retirement, I continue to enjoy my wife and my adult children. I take care of my mom, and I'm learning from my father how to be a farmer. In fact, I was certified a farmer by the Department of Agriculture. If confirmed, along with my fellow board members, I will provide backup to Walter Leon Guerrero and the agency. And I'll provide them backup in ensuring the agency does 3 things. First one is to maintain a high quality environment at all times to guarantee enjoyment by all on the island now and in the future. Second thing, I will ensure that the quality of our land, our water, our air is not degraded by any pollutants or any chemical, biological, or physical elements. And third, I'll ensure our agency provides a unified, a integrated, a comprehensive, territorial-wide environmental protection program and the framework to execute that plan. If confirmed, I will make time to make all board meetings. I will make time to understand all the issues at hand so I can make an informed decision. I will welcome all debate. I will be open to all ideas. I'll be transparent. And if needed, I'll recuse myself to avoid any conflicts of interest. If confirmed, I will also use my veteran status to enhance our relationships with our military partners. In closing, I'm honored to be here, to be nominated for this position, and I'm ready to serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bloss. So, yeah, I noticed in your resume that you actually served as a reactor mechanical assistant.
Yes, in the Navy, I was a nuclear trained officer. As a nuclear trained officer, I supervised, I trained, I maintained, and I operated nuclear propulsion plants on board nuclear-powered war vessels such as aircraft carriers and submarines. So in that position, in addition to supervising, operating, and maintaining, I also ensured the general public was not exposed to any radiation or contamination associated with naval nuclear power programs. So I'm well versed that the Navy did a good job in training me how to be a nuclear plant operator. In fact, many of our Guam residents don't realize in our home port of Apra Harbor, we have up to 8 nuclear reactors in the harbor. Fortunately for us, the Navy in the past 60 years have been successful in ensuring reactor safety. So nothing to worry, in my opinion, nothing to worry about the Navy. However, we got to keep them honest, so we just got to continue our monitoring so we can provide them some backup.
So that's important expertise. I think you bring important expertise to the board, that insight, and how nuclear waste was processed.
Yep.
I think that's important. So, do you, in review of the board, have you reviewed the board meetings? Have you been to a board meeting?
I've only looked at the minutes online. That's what I've seen. And in those minutes, I noticed we do a bunch of notice of violations. We rule on those and various other items. I noticed in January, February, we didn't have enough to make a quorum. So the risk there is that any notice of violations may be voided because we don't have enough board members. So that's why I stated it's very important that I make all the board meetings.
Yes, that's important. So in regards to making decisions, how do you go about deciding on an issue when it comes to like notice of violations or anything that comes before the board? How would you describe your decision-making process?
My decision-making process, first of all, I will take the time out to understand all the issues at hand. Keeping in mind the good of the island, the good of the people in determining how I will vote or make a decision. And then again, I will welcome open debate. I'll listen to everybody's ideas. And then again, keeping the good of the island in mind when I finally make that decision.
Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge the presence of Senator Therese Terlahi. Thank you. So I noticed there are several people that have come here possibly to testify on your behalf. Is there anybody else? If you're interested, if you can please come to the table. Hi, good morning. Mr. Ripley, were you going to testify on behalf?
Yes, Senator.
Okay, all right, so I will have you start.
Afternoon, good morning, Senators. Happy New Year. Uh, my name is Nick Rupley Lee. I'm the Public Information Officer for the Guam Environmental Protection Agency. We're here to support the nomination of retired U.S. Navy Captain Blas. Uh, I'll keep this very brief. We're very proud of our board. We have a very robust makeup in terms of the disciplines that every individual in the board represents. We have members from the legal community, the business community. We have an educator. We've got someone who's an expert in solid waste management. We believe that Mr. Blas's leadership skills, his experience, and his education will complement an already robust board, and we look forward to his confirmation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rupley. Mr. Perron?
Hey, good morning, Senators. My name is Bob Perrin, and I'm the chairman of the board of the Board of Directors of Guam EPA. And I'm here in support of the nomination of Mr. Blas. I've looked at his resume and seen all the accomplishments he's had during his life and all the experiences. And I really look forward to him joining our group on the board. And his reputation precedes him. He has a very solid reputation. And again, I look forward to working with him should you confirm him, which I hope you will. And as I said, his resume is very strong, and eager to work with him and let him apply his judgment to the areas of the environment and for helping the people of Guam. So that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I have no further questions, and I do appreciate that you accepted the nomination and during your retirement days. And thank you for coming back to Guam and providing that service. So I would like to open up the floor to my colleagues for any questions. Senator Rigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning. Congratulations, first of all, on your nomination. And with that, I do have a few questions. The first is with regards to, in the past, there have been, I think, notices of violation and other things issued to military contractors. I know, for one, there was a jet fuel pipeline that leaked. And there were news reports about how the amount that the contractor was fined was less than what they could have been fined, significantly less. There were people in the community that were very upset about that. They felt it was more or less a slap on the wrist as opposed to an actual fine to really hold them accountable for the environmental mess that they caused. So with that, my question is, what are your thoughts on those type of things with regards to military contractors? How tough are you going to be on people who violate environmental laws?
Again, for the good of our island, I'll be very tough on violators. From my experience in the military, we hold our contractors to a higher standard than most. The military, again, from my experience, will make it clear what the requirements are and what the repercussions if they violate those requirements. So I would see no reason why we wouldn't fine military contractors any less, because they know the rules. So again, I would be very tough.
Thank you. Illegal dumping is a big issue on Guam. Of course, it's a big challenge. Do you have any ideas, or what do you think can be done to curb illegal dumping?
Well, my father was the mayor of Mingilao, so I learned from his time as the mayor how bad. What I think in all my duty stations in the mainland and even in Hawaii, they make it easy for the residents to dispose of their trash. One thing I did notice in Guam is aluminum cans. I collect aluminum cans because that's how I pay for my golf. The difference, I think here in Guam, and again, I'll work with the board members and figure out why in my opinion, we don't give our villagers an incentive to collect more aluminum cans because we don't pay them a lot, right, to recycle. So with illegal dumping, I think we need to make it easier for our residents to be able to dump the trash, not cause them to make the decision. I'm going to turn in my trash, or I'm going to dump it in the jungle. We just got to make it easy for them.
Thank you. I agree. And my final question is there anything you could say would be your main priority or objective should you be confirmed to sit on the board? What's important to you, I guess? What would be a main priority for you as a board member?
To be able to sustain our environment. We don't want to jeopardize an environment for the people of today, and then compromise my children's generation, grandchildren's generation. So again, sustainable environment.
Thank you very much. Thank you. No further questions, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rogel. Senator Therese Jalahi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Mr. Blas. Thank you.
Morning, Senator.
Thank you for
Class
agreeing.
of 81, class of 81.
Yes. Thank you for agreeing to serve in this capacity, and welcome back to all and your
Thank you.
family, and welcome to all your family who are here today. In regards to EPA, I have no doubt that you're qualified to serve on this board, but I do want to ask you about a couple of things. Serving on these boards, I think, come with a lot of political pressure, and especially Guam EPA, particularly because there's this, we have notice of violations for companies, and we have a quite large recycling revolving fund
Yes.
that has been a political football over the years, because everybody wants to be able to use that for purposes that they think are valid. But we've just recently ensured that the Guam EPA and the board of directors are going to be the ones to dictate or lead as to how those funds are going to be used. And they laid out a plan that we found, very good, that it would be used for its original purposes, and that is to, of course, reduce waste and ensure our landfill does not get filled with things that it doesn't need to be filled with, and to institute a very good recycling program on Guam. And to get rid of debris that right now we are unable to get rid of. I think that's still a big challenge that you're going to have on your hands. But I guess I just wanted to ask you, for the record, if you feel like you would be able to withstand this type of political pressure.
Well, I'm not a politician. I've been in the service for the past 38 years, so I guess I got to learn the politics here, but politics has nothing to do, or shouldn't be a play in how we treat our island.
All right.
Right?
The director of the Guam EPA, if I understand correctly, is not one of those subject to legislative consent. It's subject to the boards.
Right.
So the Guam EPA board is the one who confirms the director. And so they have done that for Walter for this new term. And I guess I just wanted to put that out there also. So that's also another responsibility that not all boards have, but your board has. It's to oversee this director, because we can call oversights, but that confirmation and consent process is yours.
Well, what I stated earlier, that as a board of director, I will provide forceful backup to Walter.
Yes. Well, you're also his boss, right?
Yes.
And so it's that role, I guess, that I'm pointing to. Recently, there have been investigations regarding this Agent Orange, whether Agent Orange was used on Guam, and the Department of Defense had denied it, but the Guam EPA, together with the U.S. EPA, had conducted tests, and one of the tests was in coordination with the Joint Region Marianas up at Anderson, but the other tests were done outside of the base. And in some of these tests, well, obviously they were not, I think it's my understanding that Guam EPA and US EPA would have liked to conduct more tests inside of the bases, but were denied access, at least on one occasion. And so I just want to know if you feel like you're able to back the board up in their request for access for this type of testing.
Yes, I would back the EPA in getting on board. Now, again, from my experience with regard to nuclear power on bases, the Navy is very leery about providing people come on base to test for radiological conditions because at times they could misinterpret the data. However, the Navy is with regard to nuclear power, they're very good at keeping records. They're very good at monitoring. They're very good at knowing the status of the environment. So I couldn't understand why they wouldn't let anybody on the naval bases. So I would bring that up, say, hey.
All right, I'm sure they're trying to work it out with them, but if they could use your
Actually, I know
assistance.
Captain Grimes. I've worked with him before.
Yes, this
so.
is a contamination we're talking about, that we've got split test results, whether they're
Sure.
actually, these contaminants exist or do not exist.
Sure.
And we found them to exist outside the base in some tests and to exist on the base, or at least on one test. And so we want to confirm this, of course. And we're looking a lot at the fuel lines, and all these fuel lines lead on to Anderson from down south. Anyways, other issues such as notice of violations, as my colleague has stated earlier, I think the Guam EPA has adopted a policy now that has made these notice of violations more transparent. I've seen in their minutes, they're very actively discussing them with the board, and that the board has a very active role in following up. So I want to thank the board for that. And but I think the public, if we could just continue to keep them informed, announce as much as possible. You are a regulatory agency, and part of announcing your successes, I think, is going to help to deter other types of activity that contribute to our contamination or pollution here on Guam.
Right.
So that's all. I just wanted to encourage that they're doing. It looks like they're very active. It's looking much more transparent. But still, I think if you could go out and announce it to the public, I would thank you for that. And I know that we've had a roundtable in here on the illegal dumping, and it was EPA staff that came up with excellent plan, I thought, and I'd like to see that implemented as much as possible. They've laid out what they feel would work. Thank you.
I think taking money away from somebody is a good motivator to do the right thing.
Hopefully, but I think they've also said taking it away from those who don't have it, it's not going to deter them. So we need a combination. Yep. But thank you. Thank you, Mr. Boss. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Terlahi. Senator Castro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I just want to make it noted for the record that this would be Nonito Blas Jr. Not that I would have exception to the nominee. I just think it's actually even better that we have the son of the former mayor, so you could put in a little more than 4 years. Welcome back, Captain. I do want to highlight for the record, Madam Chair, that the nominee has extensive education and experience, both in the military and through formal ed. He has his MBA. I can also appreciate Senator Perez that his knowledge and skill set and exposure in dealing with contaminants is definitely a plus. So with that said, I also would be remiss if I didn't thank the Leon Guerrero administration for reaching out and giving you the opportunity to serve your community again. I would like to encourage you, if it's something different from what's already been said, to think out of the box when working both with the administration and the EPA. I'd like to encourage you to look towards your private sector partners and also the federal government. You mentioned the military, and I'm going to address that in a minute. One of my colleagues mentioned that illegal dumping is a challenge. We also know that recycling is a challenge. And in my humble opinion, with respect to illegal dumping, in my opinion, it's going to require a multi-agency approach to address this. I've had those conversations in my first term. Certainly hope that you can pick that conversation up once you're confirmed. In dealing with abandoned vehicles, and forgive me, my knowledge is neither wide nor deep on the issue, Mr. Chairman, or other members of the EPA, but oftentimes I've had conversations either with GPD or other agencies that have cited certain limitations, like the availability of land as one, handling of certain contaminants is the other, and frankly, just the whole investigative side of dealing with illegally dumped vehicles or abandoned vehicles or what have you. And so I want to encourage you in this sort of stream of thinking out of the box that you look towards outsourcing that with your board. Perhaps we can identify a third-party provider. I don't know of any off the cuff, but I think it provides numerous benefits to the community if we just let the government do what it does best and let private sector entities who have not only the capacity but the ability to absorb that liability outside of the government, whether it's now or whether they're bonded or whatever other types of assurances they can provide, so that if the environment is contaminated as a result of dealing with those illegally abandoned vehicles and placed on other properties, if the leakage is there, that they can mitigate that. I appreciate your knowledge of nuclear reactors in Apple Harbor. I had no idea there were 8 or however many you mentioned, but my point would be along the lines of probably one of our more ardent environmental activists on the panel here. If I could just relate from, again, another professional experience back in the time of the late Senator Angel Sanchez when I worked for him, there was a notice, I'm not sure if it's US EPA or EPA at the time or GRM, whoever it was an authority in the community that had released the results of the Gaudel, a grouper fish, having been contaminated beyond a certain level of acceptable toxicity.
Right.
And the senator at his time, he took it upon himself and the entire team of volunteers and paid staff, and went house to house, door to door, passing out flyers, warning people of this finding. Taking all that into mind and looking at you and your experience, and going back to my encouragement to think out of the box, I want to encourage you and your team to utilize technology so that we can respond swiftly and accurately to any threats on the environment that may be posed, whether it's by our military partners or by ourselves, the public, the general public. With that said, Madam Chair, that's all I have for the nominee. You have my utmost confidence, Captain Blas. Welcome back. You come from a long line, or a very wide line, if you will, of public servants, and my hat's off to the former mayor, your father and your mother. Nonito Blas is here, and his beautiful wife. I know that your father's sister also served, former Mayor Margaret Blas in the village of Asan, and I know your late Uncle Frank Blas served for Tumuning, Tuman, and that general area, and Harmon, and I appreciate the public service that your family has committed themselves to, and welcome home, and you have my unqualified support for confirmation of your nomination.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Castro. So that concludes the testimony regarding the nomination for Nonito Blas, and thank you for accepting this nomination. So, Suzuz Masi.
All right, thank you.
So the next item on the agenda is to hear testimony regarding the executive appointment of Ms. Cynthia V. Ikube to serve as member of the Guam Board of Equalization. So the Board of Equalization has 2 major roles. One is the certification of the roles. So the Secretary of the Board shall certify the corrected roll for any year to the tax collector on or before October 31st of that year. And the Secretary of the Board shall deposit all the records of the Board relating to that roll with the assessor. And then also, no assessment shall be reduced unless either the person assessed or his agent files with the Board a written application showing the facts claimed to warrant a reduction, or the assessor recommends in writing that a reduction be made. So basically, it's about ensuring that the land taxes are appropriately filed, and as well as dealing with appeals. So I would like to call upon the nominee, Cynthia Ikube, and anybody who has come here to testify on her behalf. And I believe we have Mr. Artie Logan. And if we can start with those, Mr. Logan, before we ask for the testimony from Mrs. Akube. Ms. Akube.
Thank you, Senators. My name is Artie Logan. I've been with Reverend Tax probably all my life. I've been through a lot of issues at Reverend Tax, and one of them, as a former director, was the real estate, which I got really involved with. And one of my, I've been working with Cynthia since the Camacho administration. So she's been there for a while. Her experience that she has and that she's learned through the years is very valuable to Reverend Tax. Last night I was watching TV and I saw her on TV with a client. I said, wow, she's set up for and still doing this volunteer work, and yet she has a lot of clients that need her help too. So I've been working with Cynthia since way back, early 2000s, and we've had issues with how to assess, how to collect. We even changed the 3-year assessment period to 5 years. Through our experience, there's easier ways to look at assessing the properties. We've looked at that. It's just a funding issue. It wasn't a priority to get that done. But if we had at least looked at technology, what's out there, and we tried to get that done, I don't know how far they are, but if we can just even look at properties and look at the assessment last few years or the last time, and look at the new assessments that we need to make today. Just look at the maps that are out there and see all the improvements, all the properties that are there that are not assessed, and capture those as escape assessment. I think Cynthia and I were looking at that since 2004. So it would be a disservice to the government and the people of Guam if she wasn't nominated. And this is her 3rd governor that she's going to be under. So I support her in her nomination. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. And so now for Ms. Akube.
Buenas and half a day, Senator Chairperson Perez, Senator Terlahi, Senator Rigel, Senator Castro, and members of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, Taxation, and Procurement. As the committee is aware, my name is Cynthia Ikubi, and I'm pleased to appear before this legislative body to provide testimony in support of my nomination to serve as member for the Board of Equalization. As a brief summary of my background, and I believe that Mr. Logan has mentioned, I am an attorney and a private practitioner, and I'm licensed to practice in all local courts of Guam, the Federal District Court of Guam, and the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. I have practiced law for almost 29 years, serving 1.5 years with the government through the Attorney General's office, and the remaining time in private practice. I was initially appointed to serve as a member of the Board of Equalization in 2004, as Mr. Logan had pointed out during the Camacho administration, and have continued to serve on the board up to 2019. Having served on the Board of Equalization, I've recognized the importance and duties of this particular organization. As members of the board, we are tasked with the responsibility to ensure the certification of the real property tax roll every October 31st of each year, and to address appeals filed by property owners seeking reduction of their real property taxes, taking into consideration the information submitted by them relative to the appraised values of the property and land assessment values. Throughout my many years of service with the board, I have acquired both valuable and institutional knowledge necessary to fulfill the mandate of the Board of Equalization. I look forward to my continued service to the board and to the people of Guam, subject to favorable confirmation by this legislature. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present this testimony, and I welcome any questions by the senators concerning my appointment. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Kube. And I think it's very, we're very honored that you've served 3 governors, because I think this role is so important and oftentimes overlooked. So we do appreciate the institutional knowledge that you bring. So in that time that you've been serving, what have you seen as some of the challenges, and what are some of the areas you think that needs to be addressed or prioritized?
Thank you, Chairperson, for that question. When I came in, when I was appointed in 2004, one of the biggest challenges, and I think Mr. Logan pointed out when he was then the Revenue and Tax Director, was Guam had just suffered a major typhoon. I believe it was Pong Song Hwa. There were problems with records that we had difficulty with. Many of the landowners had filed appeals, and those records were lost. That's one. The other thing was, prior to me, there weren't any predecessors on the Board of Equalization that could address these issues. So there were twofold major issues coming into this. One is we had not had any members appointed for at least a 4 to 6 year term, could address the issues of the real property tax assessments, and we lost a lot of records. In that process, I believe the Department of Revenue and Taxation, due to the typhoon, had relocated its facility, making it more difficult. So I believe that was sort of the practical challenges that I had to face as a member on the Board of Equalization. And with that, we had thousands of appeals that had to be addressed and that were pending for years. I think how we addressed it was because of the commitment of the administration to keep members on the board. I stayed on because I felt that it was important, not just service to the government, but service to the people of Guam. It just needed to be done. And we were fortunate enough to keep some of the members to address this through having weeded out those who had filed appeals and addressing those, whether or not it could be done administratively or it actually had to come to the board. I found that a lot of them were just technical issues that if it went back to Revenue and Tax, they needed guidance how to do it. And the other part is we actually did fact findings where we called in these people who were appealing and actually had hearings. I remember there were days, nights that we stayed, consecutively for a week just to kind of organize which appeals we would do first. If it was sort of, for example, a block appeal, we had, let's say, in a hotel or owners of a hotel that had several hotels that appealed each hotel, requesting a reduction. The other part is we had individual landowners, so we had to break it out and organize it and then set it and then notify them and then ask them to bring in experts, and usually they were, if not the actual individual, they were representatives of the companies, of the individuals, and or appraisers. The other thing we had difficulty with was because of the issue of not implementing the triannual valuations, we were stuck with what the numbers were. So there wasn't much to address the land valuations. All we could focus on was the improvements. And so with the hardship that we went through, we were successful enough, at least through my administration, to resolve many of those. And as a result of resolving some, others had already either withdrawn their petition or we reached a resolution. So those were the practical difficulties. The other thing is, because this is not a exciting position, it was very difficult, I think, for the administration to get members to stay on this board. And so I felt it was, for me, I felt an obligation to stay on to try to resolve a lot of these issues, because it isn't a very exciting, but there are reasons why we need to do this, and it was important to certify the role and for the government to rely on those numbers and to to issue the assessments to the landowners and the hoteliers and companies, so they would pay these taxes, so it puts back the money into the government coffers. So I think the difficulty, the issues that I see right now, having served on it, is ensuring that there are enough members to serve. Another important issue that I noticed that was addressed in the last nominee is conflicts of interest come up. As an attorney, and I know Senator Dr. Lai is very aware of this, as attorneys, we're tasked with the responsibility of ensuring that we meet our ethical obligations. And one of that is to ensure there are no conflicts of interest. In my tenure, I have had conflicts of interest, which I have disclosed to the board, where I've had represented clients who have filed appeals, and I've had to disclose that to the board, that I cannot sit in judgment or make any decisions. When I've recused myself, it limits us to only 2 members, which makes it very difficult, and then the issue goes unresolved. So I believe that having, trying to put in more members, which I see now, we've got a new member of the board, Mr. Garrido, and so that is another thing. The other thing I do think is really important that I've experienced in this last evaluation was, it is important to do the evaluations for the properties, and it is also important that the person or company that's selected not only do it, but ensure that when the time comes, when we have appeals filed, that individual also be an agent or representative of the Department of Revenue and Taxation to testify, because a lot of times we will have appraisers or experts who will come in advocating for their client to demonstrate that there should be a reduction in the taxes. I'm not saying that that's not uncommon, that we've also reduced the taxes, but we also need somebody to advocate on the part of the government to say why it shouldn't. And all we are board members to review the information, review the testimony, and have somebody on both sides. And I thought that this last term was very difficult, and I've informed Department of Revenue and Taxation that whoever they select, that be a part of their contract, that they do come in and they do testify on behalf of the Department of Revenue and Taxation as to why they reach that conclusion. I cannot testify, none of my members can testify, but it's helpful for us so that when we hear the information, we can make a reasonable determination as to whether or not there should be a reduction or not. And so those are the practical comments and issues that I also think that one thing is to give Revenue Tax the resources that they need. Sadly, I know that they were strapped for help, and they were very diligent, but because I understood that they were having difficulty in even trying to put together an agenda, of course I came in and I helped compile the agenda, and I told them that this is a really important component of their job, is to get the resources so they can have the right people to ensure that the agenda is completed, the minutes are completed. And so they were just always lacking in staff because of funding issues. So I didn't mind helping them, but I think for purposes of this particular board to do its duty, I thought it was imperative that we should help support them with the resources that they need for staffing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that very in-depth discussion about your experiences and the challenges and how you overcame the challenges. So in regards to appeals, so what is the caseload now for appeals?
I believe in 2018, I could be wrong, it's either 17 or 18, we've initially had 1,000 appeals because of this new valuation that was conducted by Cornerstone, who was the awardee of the RFP. But the way our board addressed it was the board directed Revenue and Tax to go back to each appeal, try to go through it and to determine and ascertain whether this is really a true appeal or this is a technical issue. And what I believe we were successful in doing was They were able to go back, address the issue with the person appealing and with Cornerstone, and a significant number of them were able to resolve the technical issues that many of the appeals were withdrawn because, or modified because either it was an issue, let's say for example, when they did the valuation, the appraiser determined that the roof was tin, but in fact it was concrete. So, or vice versa. It was concrete but actually tin, which makes a big difference in how they do the evaluation for improvements. So I think that Revenue and Tax staff, the Real Property Division was really diligent in doing that, and it was very successful that the numbers dropped from over 1,000 to now I think we're at 100. So for myself, I don't want to have to sit there through 1,000 appeals. If a lot of these things is a technical issue, let's try to resolve that first, and then let's get the real issues, you know, that we need to address as a board and determine whether or not there should be a reduction or not a reduction. Ultimately, the goal is to ensure the funds are really for the government to help with infrastructure and whatever, you know, things that the government need to do based on the funds that are acquired from the property owners. So I can say that was really, you know, really helpful. I know that there should be another RFP going out this year because I believe that the 5-year mark may be expiring or will expire. So in answer to your question, Chairperson, that's what we did.
Thank you. So I have no further questions, and I do support your nomination. So I would like to actually open the floor to my colleagues, Senator Therese Terlahi.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, Cynthia.
Good morning, Senator.
Thanks again for being willing to serve on this board. I agree with Mr. Logan that your experience is going to be invaluable.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you for pointing out the conflicts that you've had and how you've had to get off, not serve in those appeals, and that the issues that the board faces.
Thank you,
I appreciate that. Could I just ask, if you're now pending about 100 appeals,
Yes.
and I've seen in your June 2019 minutes, have you met since June 2019?
I believe, Senator, we met one time, but now that my time is aged out, we're not meeting.
Okay.
So that's really the reason. We were scheduled to start in January of this year to start setting a schedule for the remaining appeals. Mm-hmm. But it was brought to my attention with my nomination, and so in my mind as an attorney, and I contacted RevTax and informed them I don't feel because now my time has ended, it's not clear to me that I can continue to serve as a nominee pending confirmation, and I think to err on the side of caution, they decided that we won't schedule any meetings subject to a finalization or confirmation. So that's where we're at, Senator. We're supposed to set up a time to start reviewing the remaining appeals.
Okay, so you're being appointed to serve from August 29, 2019. Is that when your prior term expired?
I believe so, yes.
Okay, all right then. So out of the 100 appeals, may I ask how many of these are based on that recent law that the legislature passed to tax the 1 million and above? Are you seeing appeals in that type of a case?
Not yet, Senator.
Okay.
I haven't. These were older appeals
All
because
right.
a lot of this had to do with when Revenue and Tax had first issued out its RFP to address the valuation. And so to keep it in parity with, let's say, current appraisers, in the past what I've seen is this. You know, I mean, this is Government of Guam, and these are the appraisers. Only as to improvements, land assessments, we can't address because it was not addressed. It was already set, except by my understanding, statute. So now on the improvements, we're starting to see that there's now a parity, simply because of the recent evaluation, I believe in 2017. So we're addressing those. We haven't, I don't believe there have been any appeals with respect to the recent legislation, Senator, on that yet.
Okay.
I'm not to say that we won't, but I haven't seen it yet.
All right, I think it's an excellent idea that you had also, that it be included in the contract for the
Yes.
next appraiser, that they are going to defend their certification
Sure,
and help the board
absolutely.
at least argue
Well,
on that side why.
You know, Senator, the problem is that revenue and tax, they're acting as, this individual is an agent. And the revenue tax staffers are not going to know what to say. They're just going to rely on, here's what our expert contractor
Sure.
provided. So it would be, to me, unfair to have them come up against an appraiser who's had years of experience and say, here's the reasons why we want a reduction. So I've spoken and I've addressed those issues with Director Shimizu and Director Santos, and they're aware, and I believe, I'm hoping that, when the time comes that they'll ask our input, but that's definitely, I think, an important component. So we have a real parity of representatives that can really address why they believe that it should be higher or why they should be lower, and we make the determination.
So I just received my recent real estate property assessment, but when do you expect the next, I guess, valuation or certification to be done?
My understanding is, I'm thinking it's this year. I could be wrong, but I thought that we had it 2015 or 16 was the last. So it's every 5 years, my understanding. So I think it's supposed to be this year.
All right, I think it's supposed to be, and in the budget, if I remember correctly, we put that it may be funded out of proceeds from, it wasn't specifically funded, but it was authorized to be funded from any of the appropriations.
Sure.
That's my recollection. Is that correct? All right.
And we've always
So-
had this discussion during our meeting, like, when is that going to come up? Because here's my position I would advocate,
Well, I hope your suggestion is included in the RFP. That's a great idea too. And then thank you for saying on the record that you want to defend the government's amounts and ensure that we get as much as we can from those. Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you again, Senator.
Thank you, Senator Chalahi, and thank you, Ms. Attorney Cube, for all your service, and we appreciate that you accepting this nomination. So
It's an honor. Thank you.
thank you. And so this concludes the testimony for Attorney Cube.
Thank you.
Stu's Masi.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and members, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. So the next item on the agenda is to hear testimony for executive appointment of Mr. Pelagio S. Sardoma to serve as a member of the Guam Board of Equalization. So as in the previous testimony, we heard that this role is so critical, and I know Mr. Sardoma has served on this board for many years, and so we do appreciate that you're accepting this nomination again at this time to serve a critical role. So we would like to invite Mr. Logan to provide testimony on behalf of Mr. Pelagio Sardoma, and then we'll followed by the testimony by the nominee himself.
Thank you again, Senators. My name is Artie Logan. I am here in support of Mr. Pelagio Sardoma as a member of the Real Estate Board. I've known Mr. Pell since we were young. His son and my son were classmates in St. Anthony, and I got to know him personally. But most importantly, I know his background he was a CPA, he's a tax preparer, he's also a realtor. Through his experience, I asked him to help us with the real estate board, and he accepted. He's been in since, I believe, 2004, same time as Cynthia. He's been there ever since. He's been through a lot. He has his own private practice, and in the early part of his appointment, there was a lot of issues that he and the board had to address, and which they did successfully. Mr. Pell was very instrumental. He's always in the meetings Whenever there's a meeting set up, he's always there early and ready to serve. I am in support of Mr. Pell's nomination to continue. This is his third governor. He will also be serving, so he is very dedicated to his work, the board, and I would be remiss if he wasn't reappointed. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. And now for the nominee, Mr. Sardoma.
Good morning, Senators. My name is Pelayo Sardoma. I have been a member of the board for about 14 years now, and I am glad the governor has nominated me, and if confirmed, I will do the best I can, just like what I've been doing in the past.
Yeah, thank you so much. As you can see, this board is so critical, but it's very, it seems somewhat obscure to the public's eye. So just a couple of things. So in regards to, your background, or you're a broker for real estate, and just a question about any conflicts of interest. I mean, are you able to identify when those conflicts of interest occur? So maybe start off with that question. Do you have any conflict of interest, and how do you identify that?
I did not get well the question, Senator.
Yeah, so are there any conflict of interest? Do you have any conflict of interest?
No, there's no conflict of interest, but right now, we have, as Ms. Cynthia mentioned, that there are quite a few appeals remaining, and on the list, I have one client that I prepared their books. I also prepared their income tax return. So probably when it comes to for the table to vote on, then probably I will just excuse myself.
Thank you. And so, like Attorney Kube, so what are some of the priorities that you see as a board member in the experiences that you've had? What do you see as one of the priorities?
I guess most of the issues has been already discussed by Ms. Cynthia, and as a member, whatever is supposed to be in tabled in front of us, then we can act upon.
I'm sorry, can you restate that? Can you restate what you said? Do you mind restating what you said? Or do you mind repeating what you said? So what are the priorities you see in your experiences, some of the challenges? What are some of the things that you feel is a priority for the board?
The way I look at it is that as the last appraisal was about 4 years ago, and based on the new law, there will be another scheduled appraisal very soon. And then I guess the same as on the latest appraisal, we foresee several appeals again.
So thank you for answering the questions. And I do appreciate that you accepted the nomination to serve as a board member. So thank you. So I would like to now open the floor to my colleague, Senator Therese Terlahi, for any questions.
Mr. Sardoma, thank you again for being willing to continue your service on this board.
Welcome.
And I was looking through an old confirmation packet of yours from 2017, and at that time, you had testified that your attendance at the board meetings has been 100%. Is it still that? Is it still like that?
Oh, yes, yes.
I want to
yes,
thank
Senator.
you especially for that. That is very important, and you set an excellent example for the rest of board members. Situs Masi. At the last time the reappraisal was done, there was a huge increases in the taxes, and when you said, I think you had 800 appeals
Yes, yes.
just from that, and but you were able to clear all of those. I see very, I mean, at the time, now we have 100 pending, perhaps.
I think it's less than 50 remaining.
Less than 50?
I think it's less than 50
that's even better.
remaining appeals. Yeah. Out of the 800 appeals, I think it's about less than 50, which is about to, you know.
Great. What is the, did you notice any trends in those appeals, such as, you know, is there something that we could do better, I guess, on the government side?
Pardon?
Was there any trend in those appeals that perhaps the government could use as a lesson and do better in our actions going forward, or was it just the particular cases?
I think as far as the government is concerned, there's really no problem. The problem is that, as you know, this is a mass appraisal, and chances are that, you know, even a professional appraiser like that could make one or two mistakes, and that's where the appeals arises from.
Okay. I forgot to ask the chairperson when she was here, but if I could ask you, if you don't mind. My understanding
Yeah.
was that at that time of that appraisal, the government had contracted for a firm to do mapping, and we were able, at least me as a public person, I was able to access maps of land or government, you know, or access through a website, land lot numbers, and I think even at least a map and then the lot number. So, for example, if I wanted to know what was the lot number of this place, I could look at the map, see the beach, and, locate where that is, and then find a lot number. And then I could go and make inquiry as to that lot number. But now that is not available anymore, and the explanation I was given is that that belongs to the contractor and not the government of Guam. Are you familiar with that at all? Was that procured through your board at all? Or just with
I believe that was not presented to the board, that problem, the mapping problem.
Okay. Are you familiar with that, Mr. Logan? That might have been when you were the director.
It started when I was director, but it moved into John Camacho's administration. It started with my administration. It was our, I guess, looking through technology. We even went through off-island. We saw how they did their assessments. So what we did was we looked at ours and how we could improve it. So, and even make future assessments easier based on what's already recorded. Like you said, you can go in there and see. The problem with overview, it only looks down at the building, it doesn't show how many stories are out there. So somebody needs to go out there to see what it really looks like. That contract was done between the Calvo administration, which was John's. And I believe what Cynthia was saying, the board should get involved because they are the ones that are hearing the appeals on how the assessments were made. And I think they should have a great input into what should they require of the contracts so that they're done properly. I think Cynthia and Pell have acquired vast experience in the last 14 years on how they should get these things done so that they can perfect the system, so that when you do a continual 5-year assessment, it's there already. You can just do another picture and then say, hey, you got an extra building here, you got to pay for that.
Exactly.
So it becomes easier.
Yes, I would hope so, and that's why it was very confusing to me why that is not available to the government anymore.
I think what the problem is the way they do the budget. If you look at the budget of GovGuam, it seems, and it was like that when I was the director, what they do is they come up with the revenues for the whole government, and they say, okay, this is for revenue tax, this is for DOE, and they don't ask each department what they really need. When I was director, I didn't agree with the budget. If you look at the hearings, I don't know why they didn't fire me back then, but I would say that if you want your department to, especially revenue tax, it's a revenue generating department, you got to improve it to make sure that all income that's out there that's due the government should be recorded, and we should go after them. But when your records are not that good, and you go after people who already pay taxes, then you have issues with, is GovGuam really? But if, Senator Liu, she's a banker. When you make a deposit today, even like 2 hours later, it's going to show up in your account as a credit. Why can't the government do that? When you make a payment at Treasury of Guam, it's the computer is there, key it in, right? It goes into the general ledger so that you'll know what the amounts are for the GovGuam, and then it would go into the taxpayers' accounts, and it's right there, it's recorded. I think there's issues there that we tried to address. We did the POS system, and it cost the government $5 or $6 million, but it took care of bounce checks. We didn't have that much bounce checks. Now we have humongous bounce checks. $20, who's going to go after a $20 check? It's very difficult when it costs more to go after a $20 check. But when you allow somebody to use their credit cards and not charge them, that's the cost of the government. Now we have checks, humongous checks, that at revenue tax, when I was there, they gave it back to motor vehicle, they gave it back to real estate, they gave it back to business license. Now, go collect those things. Who's a collector there? They're going to sit on that. They don't even have enough staff to work their office so that they can service the people. So if we just upfront get a system that would allow crediting and allowing revenues that are coming in, report it right there and credit the taxpayers right there. It's just a system. We have the computer. We need the programmers to get that done, and we're good to go.
Thank you, Mr. Logan. Thank you, Mr. Sardoma, again for your service. And please let us know if you find us over the years of, from your years of experience, how the government can improve. For example, you're getting your information from the Department of Revenue and Taxation, and if you feel there's improvement that you have suggested and they are being slow to implement, please bring it up with especially the chairperson who's here today. Sizus Masi, Mr. Sardoma.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you again, Mr. Sardoma, and we appreciate your testimony and your accepting the nomination. And you have my support. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So that concludes this portion of the testimony for the executive nomination for Mr. Sardoma. So thank you. And Happy New Year. So now we come to the final item of the agenda, which is hearing the testimony in regards to executive appointment for Mr. Pedro S. Guerrero to serve as the member of the Utilities Representative of the Public Utilities Commission. So we'd like to invite Mr. Guerrero to the table. And if you can state your name and prior to testimony. Thank you.
Good morning, Business Notice and half a day. My name is Pedro San Nicolas Guerrero. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself. That way, the one that do not know me yet will have a little understanding.
Excuse me,
But-
Mr. Guerrero, can you speak into the microphone or bring it closer to yourself? Thank you.
Okay, is this good? Yeah, let me repeat it again. My name is Pedro San Nicolas Guerrero. I was appointed by the governor to be a member of the board of the PUC. I'd like to tell you guys a little bit about myself. Graduated in 1969 GW. Graduated with the Navy Apprentice Program as an electrician power plant. And I worked at the power plant for about 9 years. As a journeyman, this is 1969 now, as a journeyman, I lasted to be a journeyman for about 9 years, became a foreman, electrical superintendent at Anderson Air Force Base since 1978. Did that job for 10 years, handled power plants, electricians, and had about 45 people then. After that, in 1988, I got promoted again in the federal government, and now I'm at the Air Force as Deputy Chief of Operation, and I handle all of what maybe you call public works, from water, power, sewer, refuse collection, grass cutting, name it. I have like 600 people under my management and about 26 different trades. So, I had that job for about 18 years. Then I decided to retire. Meeting that retirement, there was nowhere to go, so I became an adjunct professor at Guam Community College, taught electricity. I was an energy consultant for the Air Force for about 6 months. And I was an assistant engineer at Hilton Hotel for about 2 months. Then after that, became a member of the CCU, Consolidated Commission of Utilities, 2012 to 2016. Decided I didn't want to do that anymore, so I babysat for the last 3 years. So, yeah, that's where I've been.
Okay, thank you. Yes, you do have an extensive history. You worked up the ranks, you said from an apprenticeship to a supervisor position?
Yeah, apprenticeship, my federal background is 38 years worth, so I started in 1969 as an apprentice, worked as a journeyman, operated power plants, power dispatching, cable splicing. So I'm a guy that has been in the field, and I understand how it really, really works. I was a foreman in 1976, right after Typhoon Pamela. So I have extensive knowledge in recovering power, blackouts, power issues. Those days, it lasted 45 days when you have a storm, like Pamela. I was part of the arrival of the Vietnamese people here. I kind of forgot the name of it, but we received the Vietnam war people, and we helped them. So I kind of understand the recovery of when you get inserts of things. Typhoon Omar, the load shedding blues back in the day. When I was electrical superintendent, no, I was the deputy chief of operation then, but when the load shedding days came, working for the Air Force, I brought in 10 MIGs so that we can support our own housing and our own load so that we don't have to rely on Guam Power Authority. So those are the kind of experience that I got, those kind of issues. So I like challenges. I never back down, and pretty fair. Lasted 38 years with the federal government. That's pretty good. Anyway, maybe things have changed, 50 years. We started out with diesel engines and all that, and now we're moving into more efficient generations and all that, and now solar panels and solar power is the new regeneration, renewables, thin green concept. With the technology today, we can really run the power and water system very efficiently. In the last 16 years, I guess, since the creation of the board of the CCU, a drastic improvement has happened. But also, what happened was they made a lot of loans, a lot of money, so your power bill just skyrocketed. People could not afford it. So really, the PUC, to me, job is to revalidate all those rates from 16 years ago and see what happened. Do we really need to keep building the water system today? An example, I'm going to give you an example of Tumun water tank. Has been out of service for 20 years. So why do we need to invest $14 million to have a new tank? Those are the issues to me that we need to revalidate against the CCU and the general managers of GPA and GWA and say, what are you guys doing? Do we really need all this improvement at the cost of the ratepayer? That's not supposed to happen that way. We need to survive. We got a lot of people that are struggling paycheck to paycheck. And we need to give them some relief. And to me, for example, Governor Guam, power bill today is $50 million a year. Can we reduce that? Of course. But we need to dispatch our power and our water efficiently. And they have the technology. And I don't understand why they cannot do it. So maybe at the CCU, you cannot do it there. But I think at the PUC, it can be done. Because they are supposed to regulate the rates up or down, whatever it takes to keep surviving. And believe me, there's a lot of wiggle room. When they say wiggle room in financial, wiggle room. And I think it's time to tighten it up so that the people can have some relief. I think I went over but anyway, go ahead.
No, you answered my next question. So basically, what are the priorities that you have? So basically, you're going to have a close eye on the different projects and
I think as a member of the PUC, I will request or demand a daily update on how they distribute power and water, because that's the only way you can figure out the wiggle room. When you have $40 million in the bank account, guess where that came from? Not with the efficiency, it came from the ratepayer. So maybe we can tighten that up. Maybe they don't need $40 million, maybe they only need 20. So what do we do with the other 20? Maybe we can reduce the rates. But that's part of the board, that is what I kind of envision for me to do. Since I was at the CCU, I was the treasurer, and I was the auditor. And I tell you what, I found a lot of things. And when you get an audit book, I made an audit book, and in 1 year it's $10 million of avoided spending. Like no more 24-hour vehicles. Why do we need 24-hour vehicles for? Power dies, you go after it dies. You don't need to, this is not emergency anymore. This is not 1965 when there's a war. This is very peaceful time. The power's there. So why do you need to take the vehicle home? What for? So that you can respond? Hey. So what? You know, power dies. That's what you're supposed to do. Respond after it dies, not be ready like a doctor or an ambulance. So even with that, when we did that through the audit in 1 year, it was $250,000 savings on fuel. So those are things that I think the managers are going to be really have to answer the questions, because I think the board, the PUC, has to really be the guide of how power and water is to be distributed and how it can be financially done right, not reliability. Reliable power is good, but financial reliability or stability is what we need. Financial, not whether the power's on or off, or water or on or off. I had never had a water outage in all my 50 years in AFAMI. No, that's pretty good water system. We never have a brownout in water. But power, now they're trying to build this power plant. I question that. Why? We got all these old paid up power plants. Let's use them. Don't just build new ones and then throw them away. What about the 200 people that you're going to let go? Believe me, this is work. This is people. This is our people. So we need to take care of that. I'm going to review that very, very hard. Okay.
Thank you. And so in regards to like the consent decree, so a lot of these projects are ordered under consent decree.
Yeah, the consent decree was established, I guess, like 12 years ago. After, GWA or PUG kind of, I guess, got into trouble. But really, there was no end date on the consent decree. And then we're doing projects, like we're rebuilding storage tanks at $14 million a pop. But it doesn't improve the system. It all does is store the water. The problem to me back then was they had the problem, the operation was the problem, not the equipment. It was the operators. They didn't watch what they were doing. So they had something infiltrated into the system. But, so I guess the CCU at that time hired engineering consultant from the United States. They hired engineers from the United States. So they came and evaluated the whole water system. But the whole water system is not the problem. It's only a certain area that was the problem. But when they evaluated the whole the whole water system and sewer system, the higher the rate or the higher the project cost is, the more money the consultants get. Guess what? That's where maybe we should challenge the lawyers and say, go back to court and say, I think we got done enough. We cannot keep renewing these things. They're not broken. But somehow we have this mindset that we need to change everything. No, we don't. We just got to work within what we got. We're not the federal government. We just don't go tax people and get money. This is our ratepayers that's going to pay this. So now, we should look at things like, why do we buy water from Navy for the last 75 years at 4 times the cost? We buy $6 million of Navy costs, and we pay sewer, or they pay us sewer at $6 million. So, when their sewer is $6 million, and we buy water from them for $6 million, why even have a bill? Just zero it out. But I think the PUC really needs to look at what customers we got and why our customers sets their rate at that height for us, and then why we set our rate that low for them. So, you gotta okay, my cost should be the same as your cost. So if you're charging me 4 times as much, I guess, either you reduce it, or I guess I look at your side and say, oh, Mine is lower here, I gotta raise it. So those are issues the PUC really needs to look at. And it's a challenge, but you know what? I think it's doable.
Thank you. Can you also share your views about back billing?
Back billing?
Yeah.
Well, the records that I saw when I was an auditor and all that, you know, some of it went back 20 years. And you know, on the water side, back billing is really maybe the major obstacles that the ratepayer has, because it just skyrockets. You know, we get a water break or a commode that's stuck, and you don't see it, or you're on vacation for 2 weeks and you come back, your water bill will be about $2,000 out of 40. You know, it used to be 40, now it's 2,000. So I think it's the way the rate is set that causes that to happen that way. After 5,000 gallons, I think, is when the rate skyrocket, like 4 times more. And I think that got to be reviewed. Why do we need to do it that way? That's part of the rate setting. And I think, you know, any leak, regardless whether it's in the meter, before the meter, to me, is still costly. It still costs the ratepayer, one way or the other. There was an example, a leak at the Polanta storage tank. It was leaking 300 gallons a minute on the bottom of the tank. And I went there and I said, I was the city commissioner, why is this leaking? Oh, it's been leaking for the last 5 years, 10 years. I said, how much is it leaking? 300 gallons a minute. They said, shut it off, man. You don't need the tank. So they shut it off. Guess what? Nobody lost water in Georgia. So really, our water system is very interesting. It's reverse. We have an aquifer that we pump water into the tank. You know, we don't have a river that you fill water to the tank and it flows. No, it's really interesting because you could shut off a water tank. Just close it. And why even put, you know, when you put water in like 1 million gallons as a water tank, that's money that you used to pay the power bill, but you don't sell the water yet. So why even fill up the tank? The thing, there is an EPA requirement to provide certain pressure. So why we just maintain the pressure? You know, 40 feet level, 10 feet level, 5 feet level in the water tank. So what's the magic level for a pressure? If it's 30 pounds per square inch, then maybe it's 5 feet. So maybe you should just fill up the storage tank to 5 feet. Those are the issues with operation that they need to dispatch. They need to understand. But, you know, it's not the people's fault, don't get me wrong. It's whoever can understand how to make it efficient is really what you need. And the PUC board, I think, should be the one to enforce and set a standard for how the GWA employee and the GPA employee, how they should operate their system. And that's all that is. I operated Anderson Air Force Base, water system and sewer system. So I understand. But, you know, sometimes if you're working for the federal government, sky's the limit. You know, you don't have this ratepayer that pays you. That comes from the federal government. That's free for those people. But here it's not. So we need to understand how to minimize it, minimize the cost. Refuse collection. I had a landfill at Anderson. Opened it up, cover it up, clean it up. So, you know, this new landfill that we got, the Department of Defense was not part of the customer rate when they built that. Guess what? Now there are customers. So the landfill fills up faster because we got this external customer, I call. So is that right? Maybe we should revalidate that again and see whether they're paying it the way that the land, it's the ratepayers that's paying for the landfill. So when they inserted them, did the landfill fill up 5 years faster? I guess so. So, you gotta tax them for that. It's not tax, I guess it's rate them for that. You establish a rate. So those are issues that I guess now the lawyers, whoever that's gonna be at the PUC, GP, and GW, they better sit down and look at this because it's costing the ratepayer. It cost us to go borrow money early. That's money. I mean, you're already paying for that, right? I think we're already paying for that. And we just borrowed it, but we're paying for it. So really, you need to understand why we increase or we borrowed the money ahead of time, and that difference should be part of what Navy now pays or Department of Defense pays. Maybe even the airlines should pay. If you increase your airline refuse, and it's increasing, it shortens the timeline of the landfill. Cruise ships is an example. If they come and put their refuse here, maybe we should charge them a premium because that's not our ratepayers' refuse. It's their refuse. Whoever's an external customer to Guam should be a different rate. That's how I look, That's what I think I want to establish. Let me see what else. GPA. They got a lot of external fundings. If you understand, to me, external funding is like the street light funds that Department of Tax and Rate. That's $5 million a year. And I'm saying, okay, you got system development charges. They got $10 million in the bank at GWA, and they call it restricted funds. I'm saying, why do you restrict funds? So now maybe at the PUC board, that this system development charge can be regulated by the board and say, if you're saving $10 million GPA or GWA, and you're not spending it, or have no programs to spend it, why don't we give it back to the ratepayer through a rate adjustment? Because it's really the ratepayer's money. Everything they got is really the ratepayer's money. So those are the things I'm looking at. Now, maybe the board might not like it, but at least somebody got an idea of how this thing should really work. And I think they will like it, because we cannot go on forever and keep borrowing $400 million to improve the water system. And you ask yourself, is the water system bad today? No. It's good. I think it's good. I mean, there's a lot of water breaks in the Santa Rita Agate area, but that's because the system is 50 years old and it's built on soft ground. So really, it's really a repair issue. When you repair it and you put mud back, guess what? It will just shake. You gotta go back and harden it. Make sure the pipe does not move. But they know when it's gonna leak. It's gonna leak next week, because when you like a mechanic, they know when your car's gonna break when they fix it. So it's just the same thing. So, and at Santa Rita Agate, I'm saying, how come we're not manning it better, because we pay the water 4 times more? So now those are, maybe they have to, the PUC might have to set a standard that all water breaks at Navy water system that we pay for should be a red flag to the PUC saying, what are we doing, guys? Because it's the ratepayer that's paying this. Let me see what else. That's a lot, but for today, it's.
Thank you so much, Mr. Guerrero, and do appreciate your insight. You have a depth of knowledge as far as utilities concerned, as well as you definitely are speaking as an advocate for the people. So I do appreciate you accepting the nomination. I'd like to open the floor to my colleagues, Senator Therese Terlahi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Leong, Mr. Guerrero. Um, I know you're in the community. Your engagement in the community is that you've always been maybe a critic of the utilities and the rates that they are imposing on customers, and whether those can be lessened. And of course, so then you watch very closely their activity and how that is going to affect their rates. And so I appreciate all that you've discussed this morning, and especially the questions that you raised as to, whether these could be done better, whether we could avoid these rate increases. And if I understand correctly, there's one pending right now before the PUC for GWA. Is that? And I think you talked a little bit about this, about what they plan to do with this pretty significantly large rate increase. According to PDN, they might consider this in the January 30th meeting. And the planned increase will cost the average residential customer more than $160 per year by 2024. And commercial customers will pay tens of thousands more each year. For a family that uses 5,000 gallons of water a month and pays an average of $62.98, they would see their GWA bill go up to about $76 per month. You know as well as I do that our consumers are already balking at the prices of water and power, and that a lot of this stuff, when it comes to the PUC, it's already like the bond, was approved, and it's done in stages. So it's very hard. Like, for example, the most recent, I think it's hard for the PUC to, I don't know. We're counting on them to help to reduce these costs, but I'm seeing it seems difficult because, for example, PUC approved the port's increase in rates before it improved, let me back up. It approved the Port Authority of Guam's increase in rates before it approved the Port Authority's borrowing. But it was in anticipation of that borrowing, and they said, in fact, on the record, that those rates could be used to pay off the borrowing. But I think that rate increase came right on the heels of a increase in salaries at the port also. Then we had this recent controversy over the new GPA plant that they're going to build in Dedido. But when I was reading the record of PUC's approval of that plant, they voted unanimously to approve it, although some did raise questions. The reports that they were receiving was pretty much that this was over a 10-year process. They had approved everything up to then, and so by that point, they were facing deadlines and almost, no choice by that point. So a lot of the steps that the PUC is going through, I don't know. It just seems to me it's going to be a very difficult task for you to impact rates, when they're coming in piecemeal and they're building these rates into their plans, and then we want to stop one part of the plan, and they cite that the entire plan, is reliant on this part. And so I find that very, very difficult, but.
Maybe my advantage was I was a member of the CCU, and those plans comes from them.
Yes.
The GM and everybody. I'm a new member of the CCU, so this guy's at this plan. But really, in reality, one thing I know is we're not the federal government. We cannot afford this plan like you work for the federal government, and your budget comes from the federal government. Your budget, your money comes from the ratepayer of Guam. So that's your limitation. So this, an engineer or whatever, the financial advisors, whatever they are, they got a plan, they got a job, they want to sell it. My background is operation. I want to operate it as the most efficient way it can be operated at. And why should we bundle up 10 years' worth of projects in one loan? Why don't we make 10 different loans? Every time we need the loan, we need the project, we do the loan. You know, I'll give you an example. Why are we building, why are we building a different circuit at Tumon for $7 million? And there's going to be 3 circuits to this one building. One from underground, overhead, generator.
Yes.
And I'm saying, why do you spend $7 million of the ratepayers' money to improve Tumon?
Well,
What good does it do when there's a typhoon? The tourist leaves. There's nobody there. So what are you doing? Anyway, those are the examples that I challenge.
yes, at the PUC level, we're also paying large amounts of money for consultants, and these studies by the consultants, I mean, a lot of times they back up what the high-paid consultants over at the agencies.
That's
And
what I mentioned.
I didn't finish with GWA. GWA is asking for this huge increase, yet they're one of the ones who were caught in the meeting, without open government approving pay raises. And this is the part that the public, I think, is having a very hard time to connect. I mean, they're connecting it before we are. They're saying, pay raises first, and then you raise our rates, and you base it on, we need to improve something. But we want to see from all our agencies, very, very much, a responsibility in cost cutting. Same thing with PUC. I'm wondering if while you're there, you can find ways to cut the costs of the PUC. And
that's a very, very interesting concept at the PUC. Maybe there's going to be a challenge at the PUC for accepting all or requests from GWA managers and GPA managers. When you accept it, you hire a consultant to do it. But you remember I earlier said I work for an energy consultant? I understand consultants. The higher the price, the more money they get paid. That's how consultants work. But is the issue? The issue is, the requirement really valid? What's the impact if you don't do it? Those are the questions you gotta fire back and say, well, we don't do it, what happens?
right.
But if you don't ask that question, you'll
Well,
never be answered.
I hope you're going to be able to be effective on this board as the voice of the consumers. And so I thank you for your willingness to serve on this board. Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Senator Tlahi. Senator Rigel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Congratulations, Mr. Guerrero, on your nomination, and I like a lot of things I'm hearing you talk about, particularly that it sounds like you're going to be an advocate for the consumer, for the ratepayer, and I think that's something that we sorely need, and I think there needs to be a shift in thinking. I think that the utilities has been acting more like a corporation or a business, and forgetting that the ratepayers and the people of Guam are the owners of the utility. And so they really need to think of the ratepayers. I'm glad you brought up about taking a close look at improving efficiencies to keep rates down. Considering recently there was a large economic forum. In the economic forum, they spoke about the cost of living on Guam that has increased significantly. And among the cost of living pressures, 2 of the main pressures on the cost of living are the water rates and the power rates. And they had graphs and they had numbers that showed the increase in the rates and how they've really contributed to the cost of living on Guam. So I'm glad that you've testified today saying you'll be taking a close look at that and how to keep the rates down and how to advocate for the ratepayer. I think that's what we really need. I do have a few questions. You kind of touched on some of it. I'm glad you spoke about the rates and a little bit about the power plant that they approved. That's a rate they're actually going to be going back to the PUC to seek to increase the base rate. And they've said and I was very displeased with it because originally the talk was, we're going to build a new power plant. Don't worry, it's not going to raise any rates. Then they come back and they say, well, maybe we have to go ask now for a base rate increase, but overall we're going to decrease the rates because it's going to be more fuel efficient. But I mean, to me, then you're losing out on all the savings you're getting supposedly from the fuel efficiency if you're just going to turn around and raise the base rate. You're not going to lower the rate as much as you would have had you not raised the base. So I'm kind of concerned about how they're doing these things. So that's something that's going to be before you. What are your thoughts on their proposal to raise the base rate in light of the construction of the new power plant?
Yes, GPA got a pretty extensive plan on the solar buildup. They're trying to build about 120 megawatts of renewables or solar and several battery storage area. But when you do that, and those are other, I call them GPA 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are different. Those are external power generating companies. So like NRG, for example, that's a 25 megawatt. They charge us 19 cents a kilowatt, and we sell it at 25 cents a kilowatt. Now the other two are coming in, so they're going to charge us I guess the rate that they're setting is 8 to 10 cents. But when you do the combination of power, when those things are done, which is going to be done in the next year and a half or 2 years, the rate will be lower. So the question is, what is the new power plant going to do when the megawatt at 12 noon is only 100 and they're building 198 megawatt power? Those are issues. And we're already in a contract with these people that are solar. We got to buy their power. Or actually, we will buy their power because they're a lot cheaper than GPA's power. And that's how that works. So when you do the combination of rates for each company, you dispatch power by the most efficient generating plan, which will be the solar during the day, and then at night you just look at what you got, and that's what that works. But the new power plant said they will reduce the rate down to, I think, 11 cents. Well, the two new solar companies that are going to be 125 megs will reduce it down to 9 cents. So how do you reduce 9 cents down to 9 cents? So the new power plant, all it does will replace the power plants that we got, and it's only 30, maybe up to 40% of what the load is. So really your estimates, your predictions needs to be readjusted because it's your fault, GPA. You made contracts with these two new solar companies and batteries, and I think that's the way to go. Solar, not more fossil fuel. Things are changing, batteries are getting better. So, but how they came up to that deal, I wasn't there. I left. It's so interesting how things happen when you leave. But I don't see the benefit. Actually, there's, to me, also an issue that the PUC has to take up is the security of that power plant. If it belongs to a foreign country, we're the United States of America. We're the tip of the spear. Can we rely? I don't know. I don't know what Department of Defense is going to do about this. But, I come from Department of Defense. That's why I'm questioning it. It's not, I don't trust them or whatever, but I think we need to run our own thing, our own power system, because if it's a company from the United States, I'm maybe more comfortable. That's all it is. It's just a comfort zone that I got. But, you don't want to put all your basket or eggs in one basket that belong to a foreign customer. I'm sorry, that's how I feel as a U.S. citizen. But, to me, I kind of like, what do you do with the 200 people? Is that not an issue? Just because you want power to be $20 less a month? No. You got to deal with that. And that's all that new power plant's going to do, right? I mean, that's what I'm kind of hearing is going to be, oh, your power bill is going to be less. How much? But so what do we do with Cabers 1 and 2 and these units and the people? We just close them down, and now it becomes a hazardous waste. Those are not forgotten. They're still here. So what do? You know, that's a cost. And now it's going to be on the back of the ratepayer to pay for the minimum charge. This, I call it minimum charge, but actually it's administrative charge that new power plant people will impose on the ratepayers of Guam. Is that, how much is that? You know, those are the questions. There's always going to be a minimum and a maximum that company will accept from us. There's always that's the way we did it when, you know, I worked, like I said, at civil engineering, and I did rates in the Navy or the Air Force. And that's how I deal with GPA before I deal with Navy because Air Force buys power from Navy. But there's always a minimum cap that you have to pay, regardless whether you use power or not. That's what I'm trying to get at from them, is what is this minimum cap? And I guess at the PUC I can ask, hey, what's the minimum this Korean or South Korean company is gonna, we have to pay them, regardless whether the power plant is running or not. There's a cost. There's always gonna be a cost because they, you know, they have to pay their, wherever they borrowed the money from, whoever, I don't know. But I knew that when I was working for the Air Force, I had to buy a certain amount of power from the Navy in order to keep me as a customer. So I don't see the difference between that and this, the GPA and the new Korean power plant. Of course, it's going to be efficient because it's a newer engine, but doesn't mean it's going to be better. Would it operate during a typhoon? You know, those are questions. Things change, and people might just conserve, and you won't even have the load. Guam is an island. It's limited to what it can do. So is the ratepayer. It's limited to what it can pay. I think the plan is not bad. Don't get it wrong. But I think it's too fast. 2 years, maybe 7 years. Phase it in so that our older units of GPA that we own can, you know, meet its lifespan. Shut it down because now, or they can build it slowly. You don't build 198 in 2 years. Maybe you build 40, 40, 40, 40. Those are, you know, like 7-year plan or something. But they want to rush this. And I'm saying, but we're not hurting. Why do you want to push it? We're not really hurting. Now you got these other solar panels coming in. We're better off. It's going to reduce the rate anyway. So why are you rushing the new power plant? Those are, you know, emotional questions, but that's reality. Did you explain that?
Right. In fact, as you're mentioning, the solar come in, I believe the amount of new solar that's coming in is just about equal to the amount of megs that the power plant would be producing, which they're saying they need about 200 megs. So that's one of the things I question, instead of putting all the money into another 200 megs, since there's already close to 200 megs that will be coming online with all of the solar projects that are down the pike. Why not invest in battery storage or other technology? But in that light, I wanted to ask you real quick, are you familiar with, and it's a new thing that's being talked about a lot in power generation, particularly in the renewable industry, is the concept of distributed generation, distributed solar, for example, and the idea is spreading out the power generation across the grid, which reduces line loss
Yes,
and just causes for more localized power production.
Yeah, when you have solar panels distributed, let me give you the example of the bad ones first. What we did was we built NRG at Dandan at 25 megs. Okay, you concentrated all the solars in one area. Now, net metering is different. Net metering is all around the island. So, in order for that to malfunction, it functions different. The functions are different. When you get a cloud over London, it goes from 20 megs at 12 noon to 10. So you got that spike. You got that problem. But when you do it on net metering customers, you don't have that problem because they're scattered throughout the island unless the whole island is under the same cloud. So I think the problem that happened, and that's the challenge that they got from me, if I ever get appointed, is the batteries you're buying is to supplement what you build at NRG. And guess who pays for that rate? We do, the ratepayer. And NRG is a power company. So why are we paying batteries for that company? So now you want the net metering people to buy their own batteries. Doesn't make sense. So net metering to me is a lot better because it's scattered throughout the island. And when concentrating solar panel in one area is not the best idea you could have. It's better to distribute it in like schools. There's 19 schools. There's 19 schools around the island. So maybe that's where this should be at, for better efficiency. That's an efficiency solution, But yeah, and why prevent more net metering? We should have that. You know how much net metering makes money for GPA? Because it reduces line loss. It really does. Just like, line loss in GPA, even on the power plant itself, is about 5%. 5% of 200 is a lot of money. So we spend a lot of money on the fossil plant, power plant. On solar, you don't. But the problem with solar is they don't operate at night. But that's why you got batteries now. If you do enough combinations of solar, battery, wind, and all that, even water tanks, you could fill it up, and at night, let it drain. So, this is what you call water storage energy. And then you shut down the power plants. Don't have, you don't have a 250 megawatt load at 8 o'clock at night. Maybe you only got 200 because you got this thing, operating at night. So those are ideas. And I think because Guam is in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, everything is expensive. But you know what's the cheapest we got and the best thing we got? The sunlight. And that's all that is. Why don't we concentrate on that instead of engines that breaks or blow up or, you don't have parts for. And, the combination of the power plant in being one big area, 180 megs, is not good to me. If something happens, you lose it all. That's why you distribute power plants to counter those kind of actions or that kind of, accidents. You don't know. And one of the things about the power plant, I'll just say it right now, the fuel is going to be LNG or whatever. It's going to be running from Apparites all the way to Harmon. We're somebody's backyard. Come on, guys. It's not as the engineering may be good on paper, but I tell you what, reality, it doesn't work that way. People do things. If you don't guard your line, And the Air Force have a line all the way up. It's diesel, it's buried so far. I ran LFM too, so I understand. But that was established before this one. And LNG is kind of different. It's a gas. I don't know if it's going to be liquid or gas, but if it's going in somebody's backyard, that's a very different story whether it's gas or liquid. Petroleum, it's hard to burn. Gas explodes. It's very different. So you got this safety factor that you got to play with the customer, the ratepayer, or whoever backyard this is. So those are issues I don't think that a consultant has reviewed or understand the impact of that. Because it's just, consultant, like I said, it's just put it together in a piece of paper and everything's nice. No, it's not. Not in operation. Anyway, taking too much time.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I agree with everything you're talking about right now, so I really appreciate it. I just have one more question. It's with regards, again, it's a rate issue that was brought before the PUC. I think it's pending right now. What it is the homeowners of different condominium organizations are petitioning to change the rate schedule for condominiums so that they would be charged the same rate as individual homeowners. So my understanding is the condominiums are charged at a higher rate, a different rate schedule. So they've actually petitioned the PUC to change that schedule to make it the same as a regular homeowner. What are your thoughts on that?
The challenge to that is the metering. The rate changes after 5,000 kW, something like that. And when you have a condominium with 1 meter, you quickly get to the higher rate because, you're more. But if you're a house, you don't get that. So the 10-unit apartment wants 10 different meters, which because, at the rate, at the 5,000 kWh rate, it spikes. The rate is different if you look at your bill. So there's pros and cons to that right now.
What about sort of prorating it so that you figure it out, like you have X number of customers from one building using 1 meter and then just divide it up?
Well, they got the smart meter design now. You could just figure that out, by pushing a button.
There you go, smart meter.
So, it's just, I don't know what the gains or the losses are in particular, but, we can always review that. That's what the board's supposed to do. The PUC is supposed to review those things and say, what's the advantage and disadvantage? And we need to change, the PUC needs to change the rules. They change the rules. But for right now, I'm open for that and to discuss it further.
Fair enough. You haven't had a chance to review any of it, so I just was
Yeah.
curious what your preliminary
No, I
thoughts are
understand
on it.
where the spike happens,
Yeah.
and that's what the advantage to the 10-unit 1 meter versus the 10-unit with 10 different meters might be maybe very little
Right,
for the power company to even fight over with.
right.
It's not even worth the fight. Sometimes, you can look at it that way. Like, is it worth the fight?
Right.
Are you going to lose 2 people or $10,000, or you're going to lose $10?
Right.
And it's a line loss, whatever. You can always recover. And that's one thing I think the power company needs to understand. The more challenge they give the ratepayer, the more the ratepayer goes to solar.
Exactly. Yeah.
They don't want to deal with that kind of. So, as a government agency, do you want the business or you want to lose the business? Those are issues you need to work with, and I think the PUC board is the one that toss that around and say, this is the way to go, or don't go.
Thank you, Mr. Guerrero. I appreciate all of your testimony today. You have my full support. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Rogel, and thank you so much, Mr. Guerrero. It's been an eye-opening testimony, and I do appreciate all the knowledge that you bring to the table. So this concludes the testimony for your nomination hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So the committee will continue to receive written testimony until 4 p.m. Wednesday, January 8th. Please address testimony to Senator Sabina Perez, Chairperson of the Committee on Environment, Revenue, and Taxation and Procurement, and can be dropped off at the mailboxes here at the Guam Legislature Building or emailed to office@senatorperez.org. This concludes our hearing. The time is now 11:05.